So I wanted to share something quickly that I basically have talked about on and off, and that's, well, my history with communication. I was talking to a friend about this one, where, first of all, I'd like to clarify first that what I'm about to talk about is, yes, it's personal, yes, it's my thing, this is my opinion, but it's also something that I noticed several people in the world, let's just say, struggle with. Um, and it's what's behind the concept of this thing called communication. Well, technically, it's language and then communication, or rather, language and intention communication. But a deeper meaning for me, at least, of what I feel communication is about, or at least what I use the word communication is, pertaining to what my experience is and why I love languages and why I keep being pulled to be some sort of advocate for this change, and not to enforce anything. Okay, I'm just saying that when it comes to languages, some of us have issues. I want to say issues. It's not a problem. It's more like, at least for me, it's no longer huge like self-worth related kind of concern. It's more about, because I noticed that growing up, I grew up bilingual, but the bilingualness that I grew up with was like tied to code switching. Now, some people might wonder, it's like, if you know about code switching, what's so bad about that? Well, first of all, it for me, and I went through self-reflective examination of myself. Like, what is it? Like, is it really bad or good or anything like that? No, it's nothing to do with that. It's more about my confidence that's affected by my not being able to be fluent in one language or the other. Um, and I didn't want that. And I think that's what my brother also realized. Even my own brother, he didn't want his children, so my two of my nephews and my niece, he didn't want him growing up to be feeling like he thinks that being bilingual means you being confused by both languages and you code switch. And I'm pretty sure he noticed that. But at the same time, it's like, he didn't have to do that. It's all about having, I guess, a specific awareness. It's really tied to unawareness. It's tied to our consciousness. It's tied to, from my experience at least, okay, and I keep saying that because I don't want to make it sound like this is the thing, but at the same time, it is. Because when we look at languages, people think right away, just think, oh, it's not my learning style, oh, this is not my style, this is da, 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 da. They tie to like learning style, this is not my method, da, 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 whatever. But they forget that we picked up our first language or languages in our formative years, before we even had this self-identity, or this identity of like recognition of I, me, or rather the ego is just a filter. And it's like actually tied to this whole thing. We're multidimensional beings, right? People probably have heard of this one, but it's, to me, it feels like it's tied directly to multilingualism. What I mean by that is not just making speeches, talking in a different bunch of languages. Just the fact that we talk about the fact that it's like, oh, we have to talk in a language, we have to speak in a language. That's not what language is. When I say language, I mean like communication, as in not just how we talk, body language, not just what we say, not just what we do, but that actual connection between people. When you talk to someone, or when you even just meet someone, there's already a transmission of energy between the two of you. Same with anyone else that you meet, a stranger, someone familiar, it doesn't matter. There's an energetic sort of flow. Whether or not you resonate with them, whether what's the word I'm looking for, whether you click or not, it doesn't matter. The point is, there is something going on. There's a transference, a communication back and forth of like you're reading each other. That's what I mean by communication. And I've come across many people, and I've seen and observed many people in the world who have issues with the way they communicate, and it affects the way they do many things, like talking to other people, not being able to say the right things, yada yada. But it also affects other things like spiritual modalities, where they're not able to fully tap into what your their intuition, their psychic abilities, and their whatever they're channeling through this vessel that they're in. You're not able to flow with that because they're having to look for the words. But people say to me, I've started this before, where people say, "Oh, just trust the spirit, blah 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 blah." But you cannot deny that the physical needs to be addressed. The physical is where we do things first, at least because we're formed in physical form. So you can't say like, oh, you have to be in order. Like for example, like for those who know Bashar as a channel being through Daryl Anka, um, Bashar would have had to use Daryl Anka as a host, so being able to use his way of talking, his vocabulary, his syntax, his semantics, his lexicon, all of that stuff. So we can't deny and be like, okay, well, we can't just trust spirit, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make sense to just trust spirit and say, okay, blah, blah. And it's like, intuition doesn't work really, like, does work that way, where there are people probably who were channeling and then they probably picked up a language, or rather they don't pick it up, they somehow the language gets transferred through someone and all that stuff, but actually it doesn't, because the being that's coming through actually channels through what's more familiar in the body. In other words, and also being the whole body, meaning also includes the brain, what's automatically acquired, previously acquired in the subconscious, where automaticity, fluency lies. And I'm saying this with emphasis because I feel like it's very important. And I know people disagree with this, yada yada, I've heard of it. It's just your thing. It is not my thing. It is your, every single human being's thing, how we picked up our first languages, whether or not we can talk in that language or not. There's fluency even when you're listening. When it's called input in language acquisition or concepts and terminologies. Input is listening, and then later, of course, it's reading. And then output is speaking. And later that. But the thing is, that's the thing, see? We like to compartmentalize things just by me talking about going into like the whole language thing. And right away we think about this and this and this and that. Like we compartmentalize everything, not realizing that actually everything is connected. You ever wonder why you're one person this here in public, and in your private life you're different, with friends you're different, at work you're different, I don't know, with children you're different? That's because you are that multi-dimensional being. But how does that tie into multilingualism? Well, this isn't about language, and like I said, it's not about it's about communication. It's not about what you say. It's about how the energy is coming through. So how that ties in with multidimensionality is the openness that we have to being able to connect in multiple directions, not necessarily all at once, because in the physical form that doesn't make sense. It's too dense to do that. But at the same time, it is there. So when we're talking about, let's say when we're talking about, just even when it comes to languages, okay, you're talking to one person in another language, you're talking to another person in language. If the person is actually, let's say, speaking one language to the other, you'll start to notice that there's a certain intrinsic recognition that somehow they're bringing in one behavioral function, like how you notice this certain, depending on the culture, even within dialects, like, for example, Australian English will be different from Canadian English, and the behavior is affected by the culture, because that's a collective thing. Culture is collective behavior. So, and how we behave is how we were brought up, but that's a conditioning, right? So, but we cannot deny that, right? So that's what it is. But so when it comes to talking from one language to the other, or like let's say you're talking to one person in a different language and you're talking to another person in a different language, you'll start to notice that there's a specific different behavior, even between dialects or subdialects. Like someone from, let's say, east coast of Canada versus the one from the west coast or mid-western part of Canada, or the northern territories or something like that. You behave differently based on how you talk as a person, because of how it's all about adaptation. multidimensionality is not about going everywhere all at once, although technically it is, but in the physical form, it's, you can say it's transcribing between things. So that's the same thing with languages. That's why there are multiple languages out there. The source of it is that we understand how we communicate at a most basic level. The same intentions goes through. But you ever wonder why certain languages don't have a translation for certain concepts? That's because it didn't exist in that culture. Even if you were to introduce something that new, it wasn't there before. So that's where you end up, like, for example, in the Philippines, they code switch. They don't have, like, for example, the concept by the way, so they'll do it they'll do it in English. So the code switch, it sounds like they're actually code switching in that regard. But that's what code switching happens too. Code switching happens because there's a missing component, so to speak, in what would be intentionally intended to be said in English versus that in, for example, like Tagalog, for example. Because in Filipino culture, that whole like transitionary thing, when you're like trying to say, it's kind of like a segue into something, like a transition, like a sort of like easing one way into something, that doesn't really happen in the Philippines. At least not in my experience. For example, if you knock on a door of someone's room, that doesn't happen. They just like knock and they'll go, let's go eat. They don't really say like, are you all right? Would you, or they don't, there's no segue. There's no like, oh, um, it's different. The way, the way that kind of intention could be like form of care, form of gentility, form of connection, or whatever it is, right? Nurturing, whatever, etc., 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 is done in a different way, right? And that's the culture, and it affects language. So having no concept of by the way, and there are people who would translate that, and I was like, you cannot do that. That's why translation doesn't work, because if you were to translate it, it doesn't work. But even if you were, and even if you were to translate like from the very beginning, meaning like traditionalized language learning, translation doesn't work because you're picking it up from the language that you've already acquired. So if someone were to learn Swahili, for example, and then you translate it into English, the person who already speaks English, meaning the one you're teaching, so for example, the one who's picking it up or whatever, if you translate to English, what their brain will do naturally, all of it, will understand the concept in an English way, or whatever their English is, whatever the culture they come from. Right? Canadian, American, Australian, Kiwi, South African, English, whatever. They'll pick it up that way. They won't really get the little subtle things. I mean, that's why we sometimes think, because of compartmentalization, we like to separate so many things that we've forgotten that they're actually all connected. So by dismissing or disregarding or having forgotten the little subtle things, we've forgotten how to be intuitive. And when we've forgotten how to be intuitive, we don't really connect with people. We lose that kind of empathy, sympathy, that actual subtle connection, the subtleties of things, intuition, instinct. We've forgotten that. We've gotten so left brain that we've gotten so lost in the whole process that it's like we don't see that everything is connected. And how we say things is actually just as important as what we say. So the same thing that ties in with multidimensionality, multilingualism, why they're connected, because we are everywhere. This is a spiritual concept, yes, but that's not the point. Right? So the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I feel like I should be more of an advocate for this whole thing, because people often take communication for granted, as if what they're going to say is not as important as how they're going to say it. And I'm like, actually, how you say it is actually just as important. So the same thing with like what people pick up from you or what you pick up from people. If they're going to tell you, if you're learning a language and maybe you're not picking it up from that culture, you're transferring your own culture into that language. You'll see it in movies. The way they do things is like, they'll sound like, why do they sound like they have an intonation like in American English for some reason, but they're speaking in a different language? Why is that? It's not an accent. I'm talking about like this. There's this thing that transfers. It's like their body language, facial expression, intonation, the little subtle nuances, it just goes in through that, it gets transferred, and you're just like, what the fuck? You know? It doesn't make sense. There's this there's this sort of like, we forget that it's like, that's not how it is. That's what multidimensionality is connected to as well. There's variety. And when we assume that when we get into a language, because we want to be practical, that it's not important, and we kind of just like whoop, 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 whatever, the little subtle things. And this is why, people who question like, you don't really speak the language. You speak it, but you don't really speak it. There's something missing there. Because it's not picked up. And it's actually done from the very, very beginning. This is why translation doesn't work. Translation just transcribes it back into your own language. And I say language, I mean the way you understand it, the way you communicate with the subtlety, the meaning behind all that stuff, the nuances, the innuendo, whatever, the things beneath all that stuff. And that's the way you understand it. And then you can get into stories again, and you can get into language acquisitional stuff like storytelling as one of those tools within this whole thing. And then you're not really picking it up, because by the time you pick it up, you go into the next. Like, that's how I feel about German. When I speak German, it's like, I still question it because I didn't really start off from the very get-go directly exposed to it. And it took me years, about 10 years, to actually even get to where I am. Even then, I still can't communicate the way people don't understand that. It's like there's that subtlety that's, and they just kind of just like poo-poo it. And they just go like, well, this is what creates, I feel it's a factor that's overlooked, and it's a factor that can be quite divisive, because then there's cultural ego, there's cultural dominance, there's cultural that's just like, oh, well, you don't speak my language, so don't speak my language. But it's divisive. It's kind of just like, well, this isn't about language even. This isn't. So anyway, so that's what I feel like it's strongly about, and it needs to. I want to say it needs to change, but yes, it needs to. We need to go back to how we were. We need to go back to that thing that picking languages up is not about languages at all. I was just talking to a friend also, and he was saying how there's two people. There's the ones who do it for fun, and there's the one who do it for practical reason. Then I told him, it's like, yeah, well then, okay, sure, there's that kind of stuff, but then what happens? What if you come across someone who's like, yeah, you do it for practical reasons, you just learn this and all that stuff, you translate, you do grammar, you go take lessons, you do grammar books, you do exercises, you go on all these apps, whatever, Duolingo, whatever, the list goes on and 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 on. And because it's easy to just get the answer right away, right? And just like, oh, I know it. Or I have good memory. Because that's how I feel about German. I have good memory about words. I can see it. But do I really speak it? Do I really communicate in that form of communication? Do I really connect? I don't feel so. Because every time I talk to people, I can sense in their body language, like they say something, and I don't get it. I know the meaning. Even if I didn't know the meaning, I don't get it. Because I don't get it. I just conceptually know something. It's not something I've actually absorbed because I wasn't exposed to, exposed to it. I wasn't exposed to the rights. When I say right, I mean, I wasn't exposed to it like as if there's judgment right away. There's the ego stuff, right? And again, this isn't ignoring the ego. The ego is a filter. But so this is what I'm saying. This is before the ego was formed, in the formative years where everything was just fresh, And there's this actual culture. There's this actual culture in South America that Stephen Krashen was talking about. How I think that people there are exposed to about 22, 26 languages, And what happens is they can speak all fluently. But here's where I feel kind of I question whether they say fluently. I hear this all the time, like fluently, fluently, fluently. Fluently has more to do with the understanding of the personality of each concept or the whole thing that's tied to the culture and the concept and behavior and all that stuff that is beyond memory, deeper than memory, or beyond memory. For me, it's the same thing. Beyond and deeper than memory, and even like, you know, knowing something. First, you have the knowing, then you have the memory, but the understanding, that depth right there. That's what I'm saying. So when I'm talking about what I personally want to share is like I want to continue this. I want to be able to advocate for this. I want to be able because it does more than what we think it does. We take communication for granted and we think it's just it's just a word you say. No. It's not important, right? Even if you're doing it for practical reasons, what happens? And people don't really connect with you. And that's what people are looking for now, isn't it? That's what people are looking for now. They want genuine connection. And this is part of that. We've taken languages and, well, not languages, communication for granted for so long. I mean, at least that's how I feel. That we've lost connection with each other. Right? You just say things and blah, blah, blah. Or you just go to a country and you say this. Oh, yeah, great. Okay, there's a tourist. Okay, the locals are like, oh, thank you for trying. But really what it is, it's a facade. But really what it is you're not really connecting with them. Yeah, it's great because you get to use their language. It's fun, great. But once you start to get to know them, this is why I see people, they talk about how, great, you're there, you're a visitor, great. And then you move there, great, yeah. Like this happens, for example, like I've seen people like in Japan, for example. Right. And the locals might be like, okay, cool, they accept you. That's one thing. That's great because they accept you and they see you as like they don't really judge you. They say you're trying, you're making an effort, great. But what about you? The one who wants to actually connect more and blend in more, or rather be part of the culture, or even if you don't want to be part of the culture, at least have that part of you that already has absorbed that culture. So you're not necessarily bound to your own previous culture, let alone, or what I mean by that is in the collective behavior you picked up, but now you have another aspect to yourself that is the collective behavior of something else. Doesn't that make you not only feel good, doesn't that affect your self-worth, how you communicate with them? Doesn't that make you connect more at the deepest level possible? Deepest level form humanly possible? Isn't that worth the time to just pick up languages like a toddler baby? Isn't that worth the time that actually will save you instead of spending about 10, 20 years trying to memorize stuff and then realizing that it's like, yeah, great, okay, I'm fluent in the language. I know 10,000 words, 10 million words. I can say a bunch of things. I have good memory. I can speak quickly. Because I see my dad. He pauses a lot. Why? Because he hasn't really picked up many things in English. My mom does the same thing. If a person does pick up an actual language, remember, it's not about language, it's about the things behind what causes the language to be the way it is. It's the culture, it's the collective behavior, and more. The subtleties, the nuances, etc., etc., etc. Because it's also tied to memory. When you're connecting, you're actually connecting emotionally, and emotion is connected to memory. We remember experiences because there's an emotional connection to it. But that's the subtle thing. That's the subtle thing that we don't really realize. We think it's all just up here. But really what it is much deeper than that. Right? So my dad does that. Like he but that's what happens. When you are no longer it's not automatic. It goes because when something goes deeper into the subconscious part of the brain, the lizard brain is what they call into the triad, whatever. What do they call it? The triune theory or hypothesis or something like that? Lizard, mammalian, primate. What happens is that because it's so automatic and it's buried in automaticity, it's connected to automaticity, fluency, absolute fluency, like genuine fluency, and an actual, like a real deep understanding, it stays with you. Just like anything that you do, like sneezing, itching, coughing. If a language becomes like that, what happens is that it no longer matters whether you forget or not, whether you have Alzheimer's or you just have a lot of memory loss. There's still something there that you're able to communicate because it's buried there. Now, the question lies is like, well, how do you do that when you're an adult? Because you've already passed the age of 7 or 8 years old. How do you go do that? Personally, for me, I don't actually have the answers for that. Disappointing, I know. But what I do know is that I feel strongly about this. That's tied a lot to the childlikeness that we were born with, the curiosity, the joy, and unbounded, literally accepting and fully integrating the multidimensional self. That includes being open and not overthinking things. I was trying this with someone, and what happened was, actually several people in the past, where they would respond right away. They would translate. My dad does this actually. He'll translate what I say right away in a different language, and it was like, so he's not actually listening. He's not observing. He's not in that childlike, sponge-like mode. He's just doing this. He's just doing this because he wants to understand in a way that he thinks understanding. He wants to know rather than understand. He's not understanding because he's wanting to know versus understanding. He wants to know it conceptually. So, and it doesn't work because what it does, it translates and it actually distracts your brain from actually opening the doors from the conscious to the subconscious down here. It only stays up here and it goes away. So even that is a form of translation because he's translating right away in his head because he's analyzing it. So how do we do that? By letting go of the analytical self. By letting go of rather the need to know. Because what you need to know will come to you when you need to know it. Bashar talks about this. He has one video that I actually posted on my Facebook page, and I think this will be on the Facebook page or YouTube, whatever. And he goes into, he talks about how stories, and what wasn't clarified there was that stories is not just story as in like, people think of storytelling. Well, that's empty. Because if you're telling a story, great, okay. But if you're not connecting with it and it doesn't feel personal, that's why we cannot just say stories. I mean experience. Experience helps us absorb information. And then he does talk about how in his culture, or in his species, whatever, that they don't rely on memory, they rely on the moment that they need to know. So what they mean by that is, at least for me, the way I see it is that they don't rely on the past to dictate what they're in the moment. Because there's still memory. But when I say memory, I mean memory itself. But when it comes to like language itself, because I was talking to a friend about this and how they were having trouble with being able to communicate and all that stuff in their modality, spiritual modality. So I told them, well, great, that there's that whole trusting spirit, like I said much earlier, that it's okay to do that, but then there's still the human side. So you cannot deny the shell, you cannot deny the form, that itself needs that. So that's why I'm saying this, all this stuff, like I'm saying this video, I'm doing this because I feel like... So anyways, the point is, I'm hoping to create a community where, and I want to make this clear, It's not going to be me teaching you anything. It's not about you learning the facts. It's not about you getting information or letting to know. Great, it could be fun, but it's more than that. It's literally, to me, it feels exciting to be able to be in a community where we all just talk to each other in our own languages and share with it using basic tools that are just available to us at any given time. Hand movements, facial expression, intonations, images, actually showing pictures as well will help. But hand movements are the most basic ones, because if you don't have pen and paper, what do? You use your hands, and you just go like, for example, walking, talking, that kind of stuff. And then you get the whole thing. The more context you give it, instead of just sitting there, the more there's actual clues to what, so that understanding becomes achieved, then it becomes even better to understand. But again, that communication I was talking to you guys about, when it comes to communication, the way I see it is deeper than that understanding of like, oh, it's communication, like talking. No, I mean the sharing of information, energetic connection. It's that connection, right? So when we talk to someone, the intention to make yourself be understood, and also to help others understand you. It goes vice versa. That's that communication process. So my hope is, when I say my hope, I mean the strong desire to create a community like that. So I don't know where it's going to be, but maybe create some kind of sort of event first. It's online, it's a little tricky because it's like, how do you do it on camera? But I was doing it with my friend, and it's just, okay, we do have to start somewhere. So I want to make it clear that that's what I want to start with. That it's not going to be me teaching you. It's not about content, okay? It's about context. It's about relating, focusing on relating, connecting, depth, right? Even to the point of catharsis, where it's just like, oh my goodness, you're sharing each other's stories. Oh my god, you're actually having fun. It's better in person, because that means we can go anywhere, have field trips, like a trip, like making it like a daily thing. It's not about the language, not about the language. This isn't about content. Okay, I just want to make that clear. It's not about content. It's not about you learning the vocab. Okay, it's not about those things. It is about connecting. Because when we start focusing more on connection, genuine connection, cathartic connections, multidimensional, connective, like empowering, self-empowering, intra-empowering, intra-empowering connections, it becomes so powerful. And we'll pick it up just like that, because an emotion is tied to it as well. That's where emotion plays a role. Emotion plays a huge role in remembering. That's the role of emotions. It has a purpose. We cannot deny and be like, no, I don't want to be emotional because it's negative. Oh my god, it sounds spiritual. Like there's this, so whoever resonates with this will resonate with this, and you know what I'm talking about, right? So that's my hope with this community thing. And I want it to be ongoing. I want it to be constant. It's not just some sort of like, oh, let's just schedule it. No, I mean ongoing. Online is the best way I could reach the people out in the world, but there's a way to do it online too. I would suggest pen and paper, or better yet, like one of those pads. If you have access to those pads where you have, if you want to save paper, there's that, what do you call that, paperless pads, and it feels like a paper pad, but it's actually just electronic. It's an electronic device. Or you can use an iPad, or you can use a pad, or you can use paper and pen and paper, or those small whiteboard sort of things, like these ones, and I just draw on it, and it uses ink and all that stuff. Because I mean, don't worry too much about resources and all that stuff. Just go with what you have. Because if it's online, that's what I'm thinking, where we could go into sharing your screen instead, and then looking at pictures, and then drawing on that thing. So that'll save you paper if you're worried about those kind of things. Either way, be resourceful. That's part of your multidimensional self. Use your imagination, right? Be creative. That's part of the whole process as well. imagination, creativity, childlikeness, joy, you know, letting go of other things like perfection. I have to know, I need to know. So therefore you don't translate. If you don't need to know and you're just flowing with the flow and you're flowing in the flow, you're not necessarily, you don't need to translate because you're using these things. We have to get away from that whole like I need to understand everything. I need to know everything. It doesn't do anything. You can't know everything. Otherwise you're just stressing the fuck out of yourself. It's like, just go with yourself. So this is more of a trigger for me when it comes to like people playing small. And I don't want to play small anymore. I want to just grow this. I want to expand on this. I for me personally, I just want to be able to connect. That's why I love languages, because I want to connect. I want to be able to say, what is it like to be, expressing myself in a different way? How does that work? Okay, cool. I'm not asking to be professional, like academic, whatever. That's bullshit stuff, right? That's the systems. That in itself is also crumbling because it doesn't work. We're a tribal species. We're tribal. We need to work in communities again. And I don't want to play small anymore. And I'm going to keep trying. And I don't know how I'm going to do this one, but I know that I want to advocate for this because it's very important in terms of not only connecting, but also little things like, or maybe big things, like cultural preservation. Imagine being able to communicate with everybody in the world and, and it creates more native speakers. Right? We just communicate, and then languages get preserved. Why? Because now you have one native speaker who, even if they haven't been to that country, they actually picked it up from the native speaker before, and then they get to pass that on too. So in other words, it becomes a literally internationally multicultural flow of cultures. Because there's this fear that if I do that, I'll lose my cultures. You won't lose it if you pass on the little things. People think culture as in they think it's like, it's just all about those things like how I make my food, this stuff. Like, oh, Ukrainian pierogi versus Polish pierogi. Well, whatever. That's not that important. I mean, you can do that. You can talk about it, sure, but it's not the essence of it. Culture is actually just a label. It's it's collective behavior. So pass that on by just showing them. You don't need to tell them. You need to get away from that whole like, let's stop telling each other things. Like right now, I'm doing it. I'm just sharing with you what I hope for, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. So we need to stop doing that. Stop teaching each other. Stop telling each other what to do. Right? Just show. Just show. This ties in exactly with the whole what's been called as language acquisitional stuff. You'll see it on YouTube. There are many people who'll be like, acquire this and all that stuff. But actually, many of them still do what you call, they're stuck on this mini concept under language acquisition called, one of Stephen Krashen's theories called comprehensible input. I'm like, well, you're missing the other part. But anyways, the point is, even if, that's why they're missing the other part. They're not getting the whole essence behind it. They just think comprehensible input means like you understand the message. So if I translate to you, you'll understand the message. I don't think so. You're just knowing the message. You're not really understanding it. You're just knowing it. That's not really what, forget the word comprehensible input. That's not what that is. I don't know. It's not clicking for certain people in the world. I don't think so. And that's okay. That's their journey. Maybe they're not in this journey, in this specific incarnation to get through that. They did that. Maybe they're not meant to get it, and that's fine. But for me, I know I want to advocate this as much as I can because I imagine this. I have a strong vision for this. I have a strong vision that, this isn't about language. This is about connection. So that means that when it comes to everything that we talk about, everything that is every aspect of everything that we have as tools, permission slips, aspects, whatever in the world, whether you're connecting through, I don't know, sports or politics or culture or music or dance or cooking or driving or legal stuff or I don't know, you name it, whatever it is, science, space stuff, aliens, spirituality stuff, astrology, astronomy, whatever. The point is, trust your inner child, right? There's a way to also go about it, which probably we'll talk later. If you're new to a language, then you keep it simple, slow it down. Definitely, translation is off the menu because I've already talked about that and explained at least 2 times why it doesn't work. And if you tried it and you tried it, trust me, it's not gonna work. You're just gonna be banging yourself on the wall and your head on. It's not setting. Why you keep getting translation? Is that what it is? You translate, right? You're just getting the answer. You're cheating yourself out of actually absorbing it and actually understanding it. It's like it's cheating. Translation is a form of cheating, at least in this regard. Translation is just a means to an end. When I use translation, I look up a concept because I'm looking for, let's say for example, like I'm looking for videos like cartoons for children. Then I look for that in that language instead of doing it in English because you never know if you're going to get it in English or in your own target, in your own mother language or first language or target, whatever. I do it in my target language or languages, and I do that, and I've found so many things because of that. That's fine because that translation works that way. But if you want to absorb it, translation doesn't work. Again, umpteenth time, I'm gonna explain it. Translation doesn't work because you will only pick it up, even if it's a concrete term, you will understand the subtleties behind it through your own language, not the target language. And it becomes a habit too. It leads to bad habits. It's just what it is. But test it out. Test it out. By people who'd be like, who are very stubborn about it. It's like they just want to translate because they just want an easy way out. And it was like, that's not conscious communication. That's not conscious sharing. That's not conscious communality. There's not conscious connection. That's not conscious. It's lazy. It's lazy because you just want to do that, and it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It will never work. Okay. It's one thing to have someone like or have something like channeling where the being comes through you and they go translate through your body because that's the message, because that's an energetic thing, right? Makes sense, right? Do I have to explain that? I don't think so. But when at a human level, we need to adhere to what the body, the physical form, our evolution has evolved into and what we're used to. The reason we don't even do translation, let alone connection to, let's say, symbols, even in astrology, that's why people, when they look at astrology, for example, or runes or something like that, because the symbols are symbols. Evolutionarily speaking, that doesn't come to us automatically. What comes to us automatically are colors, shapes, things that represent like hunger, maybe parts of your body you touch. When you do this, people automatically know that it's like, something to do with the head because you are touching your head. But at the same time, there's something there. So you have this inner knowing. It's like, that's something there. So when we do hand movements, so that's in language acquisitional concepts or terminologies, it's called TPR, total physical response, using hand. Walking fast, jumping, frolicking, whatever, doesn't matter, right? You get into little other details later on when you start to differentiate between, let's say you start talking naturally about the story or something like that, and you tell them there's frolicking and then there's, but that's because you've already picked up other things. You don't need those specific details in the beginning. So I know I've talked about a lot of things, I'm kind of everywhere, but you get the point. Hopefully by this time you're already getting the point. Not only, my wish for this whole thing, but why what I say. And there's, of course, there's going to be people who are going to be so resistant to this. It's like, fine, resist it, fine. What works for you, good luck to you, whatever. If you'll see. I don't know. For me, I know what works for me because I don't feel genuinely fluent in the languages that I so-called picked up. But I'm still gonna go on with it. So, anyways, it's way more than what we think it is. It's deeper than just even communication itself. But humanity is waking up bits and pieces of it at least. So when I woke up to this one aspect of myself, I realized I'm like, no. there are some things that I still get pulled into. Like there's still I do still have textbooks, and that sounds hypocritical, I know, because there's still a part of me that insists on knowing. So I understand where you're coming from. If you want to just know, that's fine. I can understand that. But I'm advocating for this kind of thing because I want to be part of being helped as well. Just my honest thing. I want to feel good about it, and I want to help people feel good about it. So I'm just in this journey as you are. Whoever you are, whoever feels uncertain about the way they communicate. So, anyways, I just wanted to make this like I thought it was gonna be short, but then it ended up being really long. Thank you for watching. For those who have come this far in the video, thank you for watching. I really, 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 really thank you. No. I don't want to play small anymore, and I'm looking to build a community for this one. I don't know how it's gonna go yet, but we'll see. We'll start out a little bit, pieces there. I'll send you guys the link to what what that might be. See, I question myself, right? So yeah, so it's a personal thing, but it's also you could say a mission thing. So I'll send you the link. I'll maybe post it after this video or maybe later. I don't know. Communicate. Let's communicate. But I can't force people. Most people now, when they go on videos like this, they can't stand long videos and they want it short and they're not even connecting anymore. So it's up to you. If you want genuine connections, if you want genuineness, you have to decide. Okay, I'm not going to decide it for you. No one's going to decide it for you. I know that what I want to do is I want to keep going at this, and I'm going to aim higher. Let's just call it that way. And I don't want to be stuck feeling like I can't connect with people. Okay, that's important to me. Relationships have always been important to me, genuine ones. So, and that's what I want. And I know that people want that too. So if that resonates with you, you know what to do. Thank you for watching. Thanks. That's it, I guess. Okay. See you guys later. I look forward to working with people who resonate with this. I'll see you guys later. Thank you. Bye-bye.